All right, so this is our Q2 system updates. And so we're talking really through the updates to the SyncTimes system that have happened in the last quarter. It's been a really busy quarter for us as far as product enhancements. And so lots to talk about. We'll try to run through these pretty quickly as we run through them. This is our agenda that we typically have for this meeting. And so we talk through the product vision, new functionality, what's coming up as far as short-term and long-term roadmap, and then any requests that have come up from different health centers or that you and your team have had as leaders of health centers. Our vision for the product is to provide the best-in-class solution to improve the patient and staff experience within forward-thinking health centers. And we achieve this vision by making it easy to locate staff and resources, communicate patient flow needs, and illuminate health center operations. And we have this last sentence that's just highlighting that for us, interoperability, communicating with the electronic medical record system especially, is really important, is critical to best serving health centers. This is kind of just a graphic showing that. You'll see some of these icons throughout. So locate, communicate, and illuminate. And we look for opportunities where those three things going together can really add a lot of value for our health centers. And so this is the roadmap, what we talked about last quarter. We had short term, there were about 5 things that we knew we wanted to build in this quarter. And then we had some long-term goals that we're working on building out. And some of them are really well defined that we're ready to go on. Others we're really looking for a little bit more information, more feedback from from customers before we move forward with these. And so what I've done here is just bolded the items that we finished this last quarter. And so you'll see in the short term, we finished everything in the short term, and then long term, we had a few items that we were able to knock out this quarter as well. Then we have a couple in italics. That just means they're things that we've worked on, but we aren't completed with them at this point. So today, this is just the agenda of the items that we need to provide an update for. And so I'm going to run through each of these things. So no need to worry too much at this point about what's on here, but we can come back and reference this if needed. The first piece administratively that's available now in the system that wasn't before is the option to really break down permissions according to the role of an individual user. And so these are all the permissions that are now available. You'll see that most users have access to flow stations. So they're able to publish views for flow stations, meaning sharing what they've filtered. They can update the flow station, meaning adding icons. And then they can also view flow stations, which would mean just that they can pull it up on their laptop. And so these 3 permissions are pretty standard for all general users. The remainder are more administrative. And so we'll start with departments. This is where most of the icons and the workflows are defined. And so you can have the option to view and to update departments. Displays is to manage the actual tablets themselves. You can update those displays, which would mean you can reboot or you can take a screenshot from your laptop. And then you can also view, and that just means you can see all the displays and what's going on for those. This is typically an IT role where they're managing the tablets. This just lets them make sure that everything's up. On the equipment side, there's 4 options. The first is to create and then to update equipment and then also to view. So those are pretty standard. This is when you have a piece of equipment like an EKG that you want to track when it's going in and out of different exam rooms. And so this allows your users to create, update, and view the equipment. And then this equipment beacon battery management lets you get an email if there's a piece of equipment that has a low battery. And so this is going to be available if you want to be in charge of the EKG machines, then you would want to have that permission so that if the beacon battery is low on one of those, you can get notified of it. For rooms, when it says update rooms here, this is 2 things. First, it lets you rename the room. And so if the room name is exam 6 and we're changing our rooming schema to name that 1172, then that permission will allow a user to update that room name. The second thing that they can update is the department. So if you have some rooms that are between 2 departments, say between family medicine and pediatrics, then this will allow you to change from a room from family medicine to pediatrics if it's changed. Service lines, these are going to be important. We're going to talk a little bit more about these, but just create, update, and view. And this is kind of the roles and the specialties that individual users are a part of. So we'll talk a little bit more of that in a second. The sites, this is just allowing you to view and update. The only thing on updating is renaming. So if you rename a site, then you can update that. It also has the time zone, but that should never change for a given site. And then for users, we've broken out a lot of things. And so obviously there's viewing users. Sometimes you'll have HR create users, but then you'll have a member of clinic management that goes in and updates users or updates their photos or their beacons. So each of those has been broken out, and you can give those permissions to individual users as needed. So these are all the permissions that are available now within the system, and this is live at this point and new to the system. We have defaulted, so if you have in the past been selected as an administrator, then you do have most of these permissions. If you're just a general user with no admin privileges, then you would have just had these three at this point. I mentioned service lines. When you log into the admin console, you'll see a new button here that lets you go in and see the service lines. Here we just have one, which is BH, behavioral health. Within a service line, you can have different roles. So here we have LCSW as a role, and then you can set the default permissions for that role. And so right now, the LCSWs have permission to publish views, update flow stations, and view flow stations. And anytime you create an LCSW, those are the permissions that that user is going to have. I want to just highlight a couple of new features here for users. Related to that, you'll see on the list of users the number of permissions they have. If you hover on that number, you'll see the list of permissions that are available to that user. So here, this user can publish views, update flow stations, and view flow stations. If they haven't logged in, or if they're waiting for their password to be reset, then you'll see a button here that says resend email. It'll send them an email that invites them to log in. And then it'll also pop up and say, hey, would you, you can copy this link. We've had some organizations where their email is really delayed. And so they're able to just copy this link and send that to the user directly through Teams or through Slack or whatever the messaging system is that they're using. That's just on user management, a couple of new pieces. When a new user logs in for the first time, they'll now get an automated calendar invite. That invites them, we call it our SyncTimes Foundations user training. This is just for really the fundamentals of the system, helping them log in, helping them navigate and set up and configure their flow stations the way they'd like. Ian provides this training the first Tuesday of every month. And it's a really helpful way just to get familiar with the systems, ask any questions that you have. Again, this goes to any new users the first time that they log in. Those are the administrative updates that we've had. On the communication side, the first one is, many of you have already seen this survey. A lot of you have this active in your on your tablets. And so when a patient's alone in the room, they can get a pop-up that shows a little survey and just says, how was your visit today? We can do multiple languages. And then they just say happy, medium, or not happy. And they can respond to that survey during the visit. By default, this just shows up anytime the patient's alone in the room. So if there's no provider or nurse or medical assistant in with the patient and they're just sitting there alone, they'll see this survey. We have a new option that lets you show that survey only after the provider has entered and exited the room, which just lets you get a little more complete set of information on that survey. You're waiting until they've actually talked to their provider before they're responding to that survey. That's a request that we've had that's live at this point. I want to talk a little bit about this transfer patient option. So this is available on the tablets. This is only for customers where they have an EHR integration that's live. And so if you are pulling patient information into SyncTimes from your EHR and you check a patient out, you're going to see these four options from the tablet and then also from the flow station. If you select this transfer option, it's going to show you the different departments and then which rooms you can check that patient into. So here we're seeing that we can send this patient to Seven Hills waiting room. And if you click that, it'll clear this room and it'll send the patient to that waiting room. And so that's functionality that's available from the tablets or from the flow station. The real heavy use cases for this include the lab, so being able to transfer a patient to a lab and have it show up on the lab's work list that, hey, we have a patient who's here in our waiting room, transferred here from medical. The second would be in radiology, so we're transferring patients to get some imaging, and then they can transfer that patient back to the exam room if needed. So there's a lot that can be done with this. There's a lot of data that's captured, and there's notifications on the back end that we can help you set up to communicate to the lab techs or to the imaging techs that they have a patient who has arrived. These are our, this is just what that looks like on the flow station. So again, basically the same display. You can do this from the flow station or from one of the tablets at the exam rooms. Next, we have 3 different interfaces that can plug into SyncTimes now. And so we provide this hardware. This is something that we've had requested by a lot of our new facilities that, you know, they have restrooms, patient restrooms, and they need to have a communication come out from those restrooms, and they'd like it to just communicate with us. And so we've developed some hardware to make that possible. The first one is a panic button that would just go under a desk at the front of, usually around the registration area. So this would be, as an example, if you have a patient who's being aggressive, or you could use it, say, for a code to indicate, hey, we have a code in the lobby. And so this would go under the desk, and then there's a little button here that you just can click with your finger. In areas such as infusion bays, sometimes there's a need for nurse call buttons. And so this is usually a 6-foot cord, and then a patient can just click that button if they need a nurse. And then in the restrooms, these pull cords do a similar function, and so they communicate if there's a need in the restroom. So these are just available. It's there's a lot of companies that do this, and so it's not something that's, you know, new to the market. But what we're just allowing for is making it really easy to communicate and tie into the SyncTimes system with these. Next, I want to talk a little bit about locating. So a couple new things when you're searching for users. First, if you need to find a patient, in the past, there wasn't an easy way to do this. Now you just type in their name or their MRN, their appointment time, and it'll show you. So patient 12345, John D. So John Doe here is in Salt Lake City, 7 Hills exam 2. It'll show if they're in an exam room, if they're in the waiting room. It'll also show if they've checked out, how long ago it's been since they checked out. So that information is all available here. You can also, if you search for a user, so here if we search for a provider and then clicked on their image, then it'll take us to that room and it'll flash around that room. So here this would be strobing around exam 3 to indicate that our provider here is in exam 3. And then we talked last time that we have some new beacons that we're working on developing. This is just a 3D rendering of those. At this point, we've done some 3D printing of those models. We have the new circuit boards in hand, and we're doing some testing of battery life on those. And so I think our timeline is still, we're probably about 6 months to production on those, but that is moving along nicely. The new pieces that are included here, first off, it's much smaller. Second, there's a clip incorporated, so you can just clip it directly onto your badge or directly onto your shirt. And then third, we have a button here. When you click that button, it will show you the battery life of the beacon. And so I have one here that I can show you real quick. I'm gonna need to take my video off of blur mode. I learned that the hard way. So this is just the circuit board, what that'll look like. This one has an orange battery. So when I click that button, it shows orange. And that just means that the battery is about 50% of its life. And so clicking the button shows how much life is left on that battery. So this is work in progress, overall going well. These colors aren't accurate. This will be black. We'll have kind of a silicone button, and then the clip on the outside will be stainless steel. And last, we've had a lot of updates to the reporting this month. The first big piece is that when you click on the reporting now, it's going to take you to a landing page within the application rather than opening another page or another tab. You'll see when you get here, you have to select a report. So you click this select a report dropdown, and then you can go to the reports that you're already familiar with. From here, there's 2 buttons that are totally new. The first is you have a printer button. So this just makes it really easy to print your report as you're looking at it. And then the other one is this option to save as new view. And so this is a custom view where I can go in and I can filter to say, I only want to view the last day or the last month. And then I want to view that by provider, and I can filter to only show my site. And then I can save that and call that productivity last month as an example. And then anytime I want to view that report will be available in this dropdown under the Your Views section. And so that's the new piece that's available here on this Save as New View. It's really powerful. If I wanted to have a view just showing yesterday's visits or yesterday's cycle times or last month's productivity by site, those are all things that you can save, and it makes it just really easy to go back in and capture that data again. You'll also see here that it says user type provider. And so in the past, we only had providers available here. You could only see data by providers. Now you can change this to say user type staff, and then you can look at things by staff. So if I wanted to see how many patients my medical assistants in the clinic had visited, or how many patients are integrated behavioral health providers or integrated behavioral health care coordinators had visited, then you can do that for non-provider staff as well. You could also look at some of the productivity metrics, so visits per patient work hour for staff. So for each hour they're in the clinic, how many patients are they seeing? You can look at how long their patients are waiting and spending alone and with staff with provider. So a lot of data there that that just lets you look at that more by staff in addition to looking by provider. Third, we want to talk about, there's an option now if you highlight any one of these graphs. So here we're looking at May 2021, and I just highlighted it. And then you'll see a pop-up that says drill through and then patient visit detail. So if I click on that, it'll take me to a separate view. We've hidden this data because it's showing an actual clinic's information, but you would see the site, the room, the patient's MRN, the encounter ID, appointment type, appointment time, and check-in time, and then when they were roomed and when they were done with the room. So this lets you really drill in and see how long that patient was in the room, who visited them, and how long they were in the room for those different appointment times. It lets you really go in and audit the data and see, you know, okay, I want to see what were the patients that we visited on this day and how long were they alone? How long did they wait? The other option here is on the reports, there's a patient history option. This lets you go in and see for specific patients what their encounter looked like. And so here we have a patient, the red bar shows how long they were in the room, and this is a timeline. So at the far left, we have 4:29 p.m. And then going forward, you have the just the time that the patient was in the room. So the patient ended their visit at about 4:50 p.m. The intake icon, so the icon showing this yellow, this amber color. So the intake icon was up from 4:29 to 4:41. And then this is one of the medical or the dental assistants for this patient who was in the room for the entire visit. She clicked the dentist icon at 4:42 roughly. And then the dentist came into the room around 4:47 and was there through the end of the visit. So this is just to give you a glance at the icons as well as who visited a patient. People, health centers are using this a lot for what we'd call some of our critical events. And so if they have a code blue and they want to go back in and see, okay, what was our response time? When that code blue icon was clicked, how long did it take to respond? And they can really see that data very clearly as far as when the icon was triggered and then how long it took for people to come in, which is huge and really important, especially when we look at some of our more emergency related icons, such as code blues. And then I think last but not least on the data side, you're going to have a new report that's called Analytics Utilization. And what this lets you do is just see how many times each of the reports have been utilized. And so that's here on the bottom, and it shows you which staff are using the reports, and then also how people are using the web application. So if they're creating views or if they're filtering, then you can see all that on this report. So that's the update for this quarter. I want to talk a little bit forward facing. just a few items that are coming in the short term. So in Q3 of 2022, we plan to build in some options to respond to an icon. So if I go in and say, I need a behavioral health provider, then we'd like the behavioral health providers to have an option to communicate back and say either, yes, I'm coming, it will be in the next 5 minutes or 10 or 15 minutes, or no, I'm not available. And letting the medical care teams know within the app, hey, this is how long it'll be before I can respond. And so this is something that we're working on in Q3 of 2022. We're looking for beta testers on that. So anybody who's particularly interested in using that functionality, please let us know. The second one is we've built in some benchmarking functionality into the reporting. And so we're looking for a few organizations that would like to beta test that, would like to share their data and have access to some benchmark data from other organizations. So if that's something that's interesting to you, then again, reach out and we can coordinate a time to talk through that and then get it set up. We want to build in some all clear functionality. So right now, if you trigger a code blue as an example, then all the tablets in the clinic are going to say code blue. Currently, nothing happens when you clear that icon. And so the plan is to build in an all clear that just communicates through those tablets. Okay, the code blue that happened 3 minutes ago is now all clear. We're adding some goals within the analytics, so letting you build in more goals for your organization. Then also building in the option to export the reporting data. In the longer term, so talking 12 months, again, we're doing a lot to expand EHR integrations. We want to build out our patient satisfaction surveys functionality to be a little bit more broad. And so we've talked about doing that towards the end of the visits. And then we're still work in progress on the hardware optimization of beacons. So this is the current roadmap, what we're looking forward to at this point.